Yeah, no, I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for having me, and congrats on your reactivation. I'm excited to see the inactive. Drop off your email signature, get rid of the asterisks. Joined.
I do for 12 months, Josh. I'll be good for 12 months, and then I'll be inactive again.
Congratulations for now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets, the podcast where kind of talk about tech, accounting, finance, entrepreneurship, really whatever's top of mind for me. My name is Mike Whitmire. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Flowcast, also very proudly an inactive CPA. I've been calling myself inactive for a couple of years. Oddly enough, had a bit of a bout with suspension. I'm actually currently active, so that's a pretty fun exercise I've been through. But enough about my CPA. I think we have a much funner topic up for discussion today. Recently, Flowcast hired a new president and chief revenue officer by the name of Josh Glover. Today, we have a conversation with Josh about his background, his life in general, background in the military, which is really awesome, background in tech, and then hopefully just go a little bit wider than that. So I want to kick it off. Josh, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you, on the podcast, but more generally, just at Flowcast overall. It's been awesome working with you so far, and I'm really looking forward to the future. So I was hoping for today we could just kick it off, just introduce yourself a little bit, and go through your background, and we'll have a pretty straightforward conversation from there.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for having me, and congrats on your reactivation. I'm excited to see the inactive. Drop off your email signature, get rid of the asterisks. Joined.
I do for 12 months, Josh. I'll be good for 12 months, and then I'll be inactive again.
Congratulations for now. I was at a company called Encino for about 11 and a half years. Company I was employee 23. So I helped build the company about pretty much ground up. Started off with initial concept. Throughout that journey, I was able to help the company go international, help the company really figure out how to win and deliver value for customers in multiple segments, and also help the company go from a single solution to a platform. And learned a lot along the way. Really proud of the team that I helped build and what we delivered for our customers, for our employees, and for our shareholders. And had an opportunity to meet Mike and the team at Flowcast. And when I heard where you are in your growth journey, getting ready to really figure out how to accelerate international, focusing more on going up market, delivering multiple products, and going from maybe one or two solutions to a true platform for the controller within the office, the CFO. Got really excited. I'm glad to be here and excited to get to work.
Yeah, from my lens, it felt like such a good fit given your story at Encino. Can we take a step back and chat about just early life, high school? Would love to touch on your military experience and how you really decided to join the military from there. So just take it from the top.
Yep, grew up in Dallas, Texas. I had a great childhood there, and I'm still a Texan.
Cowboys fan?
I'm a Cowboys fan. I grew up in the 90s. In the glory years, I had a good time. I did not know how good I had it, but I stuck with them. So if you meet a Cowboys fan today, they're not on any bandwagon. It's been a long 3 decades, but
it's legit. There are no Cowboys fans in LA, unlike in the 90s. There were a good amount of Cowboys fans here.
I'm feeling good about this year.
You're legit.
I think we're back this year.
You're feeling good?
Yeah.
All right.
It's my job to feel good. Grew up in Dallas. When I was 16, I read a book. It was by a gentleman named James Webb, who was a Marine officer in Vietnam. He's had a lifelong of service after that. And I read this book, and I watched the story of this young lieutenant leading infantry Marines in Vietnam. And I said, man, I want to do that. And as I joke, that's why you really need to be careful what books your kids read, because you never know which way that'll take their life. But for me, it took me on a pretty great journey. So I was lucky to get an appointment to the Naval Academy out of Dallas. So I went straight from high school to the Naval Academy, graduated with the class of May 2001. And at that point, when I graduated, I thought I would do my best to serve honorably, hopefully get to be an infantry officer, do my time. You leave with a 5-year commitment out of the Naval Academy to pay back for your education. And I thought I'd go back and serve my community in other ways, get into business and do something else. And I was in Quantico, Virginia in September 2001 when everything started. It was about 30 miles south of the Pentagon when that plane crashed there, not too far from New York. I had Naval Academy classmates whose fathers were firefighters in New York on 9/11, and I kind of knew at that point, as I think back on it, that my plan to attend the academy, serve well, get out and go into business might change a little bit. I was one of the first Marines to have an opportunity to deploy to Iraq 3 times, which is something I'm really proud of and grateful for because I signed up to serve. I signed up to lead Marines and sailors, and I got to do it. And I, in a lot of ways, feel I'll spend the rest of my life trying to pay the country back for giving me the opportunity to lead her sons and brothers and soldiers and cousins and whatnot. It was a really great experience. Lots of hard days, but I had an opportunity to do a job I had signed up to do. I was part of the initial invasion of Iraq in 2003, from southern Kuwait to Baghdad. I was in Fallujah, the first Battle of Fallujah in 2004. Then I was in Ramadi 2005. After that, I tried out for a new unit within the Marine Corps, Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command, or MARSOC. I was fortunate to pass that selection and get to join what was then called 2nd Marine Special Operations Battalion at Camp Lejeune to take a team. That's now called 2nd Raider Battalion. Really interesting history and lineage back to Second World War. And then as a new guy in a new command, got the awesome opportunity to deploy with Special Operations Marines with our medics and go to Afghanistan. And again, that was a tremendous honor. Learned a lot from it, grew a lot from it. I was wounded at the end of that deployment fairly seriously. I had to spend about a year at Walter Reed in Bethesda at the military medical facilities in DC. They put me back together, did a really good job of it, and ended up in a lot better physical position than I thought I would have been when that whole journey started. But I also was in a position where I could do the job, share the risk with my Marines, and I was medically retired at the tail end of that. So I left that, and now I sell software to accountants. So it's been it's been a 10-year journey, Mike, but it's been fantastic, and I think I'm nothing but grateful for the opportunities I've had in uniform and in the private sector to work with good people and work hard, but do work that I think matters.
Yeah, could not. And before I continue, thank you for your service. Could not appreciate it more. Like the I don't know, the fact that you view it as an honor to serve, I feel the opposite. Like, thank you so much. Yeah. And in some ways, it's like, man, I'm not the kind of person who has the guts to do that. So I just really, really appreciate everything you did. So your earlier comment, initially you had planned on going there, doing 5 years, and then moving into business. Mm-hmm. But then as you and I were talking during the interview process and afterwards, you were medically retired. It sounds, at least the tone I've heard you have, is that's not what you wanted to do. So at some point when you got deployed, like did your idea of going into business start to alter, or had your tenure in the military just kind of extended based on your deployment?
I just think there was so much going on. I was part of that initial flurry into Iraq, and then we were pretty busy. We had served special operations to Afghanistan when I was with MARSOC, and I just knowing myself, it would have been really hard for me to leave them in, because I worked a lot with them. Obviously, had great days with them, had hard days with them, and I felt like I was in a position where I could help. And so, it was hard to leave the service because, I have friends who left because they wanted to chase something else. I think it's a little bit different sometimes when decisions are made for you because you get hurt. But on the other side of it, like, I think the more I can just be grateful for the opportunities that I had and the people I worked with, the more I can realize what a rich experience it was. But yeah, it was hard to leave because, there's a lot of sacrifice with it. You miss a lot, but you also every day get a pretty irreplaceable spiritual paycheck of working with people that you care about, doing work that you believe matters. And so yeah, it was hard to step away from that. Entrepreneurship was something that appealed to me. I had been fairly early at MARSOC when it started. We were deploying teams to Afghanistan all the time, and they were still trying to build a command. And I remember talking to some of my colleagues there on my team about how we were very early and it was busy, and sometimes you feel like you're just trying to get through the week. But we just said, look, I want to build something lasting, right? Like when my kids grow up and they sit down and talk to their old man about a service, I want to be able to point at a really great special operations unit and say I had a small part in building that. So for us, that was a motivator. And when we met I think one of the first things you said is you want to build a generational company. And at my last company, Encino, Pierre Nadet, our founding CEO, who's a great friend and a great mentor to me. One of my favorite moments is in our first year when if you've ever been at a year one software company, you're just again trying to hold the walls up, maybe get through the week. Pierre came in with this big metal sign that he put on the wall, and we were at a sublet office place, and we were again just trying to get to the day. And he put up this big sign that said Encino Worldwide Headquarters. And we had like four of us in the corner working in a shared queue. I'm like, boss, what are you talking about? And he's like, man, we're just going to think big. And so for me, I've always, I'm going to work hard at what I do, regardless of what job I have, but I want to feel like it matters. And that to me has been something I've really loved about entrepreneurship, is that having left my last company and joined this one, like I can look back at what I spent almost 12 years at Encino and say, we did something good, right? I can see employees who've been able to buy their first home with the paycheck from that company. I can see customers who bought my software, received the value that we promised them, and they were promoted. And I can see shareholders who did pretty well on taking a bet on us. So for me, I'm going to work hard regardless, but those are things I believe matter, and that's why entrepreneurship's been a pretty good fit for me in my second career.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. I didn't realize you had a bit of a startup entrepreneurship going inside of the military as well, and then got to extend it. That's very cool.
It was different, but there's echoes, right? And I think again, there's trying to perform at a high level, but also build something that'll hopefully outlive you and be there when you're gone is something that is a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that really, when we started the interview process, I was in this mode where I was really processing just how like leadership and the ability to inspire is the most important thing to come out of this role. And when your background was presented to me with the time in the military, I was like, oh, that's, clearly leadership is discussed a whole lot there. It's a little bit of a different style, and I know it's a big focus. And then hearing your story was just like, oh man, this is super impressive. So could you tell us a little bit about your learnings along the way in the military around leadership style and how you do that? And one of the other comments you made to me is I was talking about our promotion heavy culture. We love promoting internally, and you made a comment. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was like, I really believe in people's ability to step up and do stuff. I would meet a group of 18-year-old kids a month before we had to go to war together, and we would just pull together. And there's got to be some really great leadership tactics that go into that. So if you could just share a little bit with what you learned in the Naval Academy, your time in the military around leadership, I'd love to hear about it.
I think if you're working with good people, they're going to rise to the level of expectation that you have for them. And I think the best leaders that I've had who got the most out of me, they believed I could do something really good, and they set the conditions for me to do that. So, because I think again, good people, they want to do something that they're proud of. One of the best things about the community where I spent my first career in the Marine Corps is there's a real focus on and it may kind of break from the stereotype that one would have about the military. But there's a real focus not on telling young officers or young enlisted Marines what to do. There's a real focus on telling them why and the reason for the mission. Because sometimes on the ground, the situation will change. But if someone understands the real purpose of what they're being asked to achieve, they're going to be empowered to flex on the ground. I think more importantly, they're going to really understand the meaning of their work. And so I've never regretted time that I've spent taking the time to really explain the why to my team. Sometimes showing more junior people the big picture revenue plan helps them understand like, wow, I'm actually part of something that matters, or helps them understand where they can move the needle. And I just do that, Mike, because the best leaders I had did that for me. And I'm going to copy what works, right? Because those are the leaders where I said like, man, I want to let this guy down, right? He believes I can perform well. He believes he's going to trust me with this opportunity. I'm going to step up to that. And I think that's a good culture to work in, right?
Yeah, that's actually the whole notion of the drill sergeant style is even heading into it. That I had, the highest level understanding, and I'll be totally honest with you. I got a question of like, hey, do you really want a drill sergeant style leader here? And I was like, that's even from my really high level lens with my limited knowledge of the military. I'm like, that's such a misconception. It's my understanding of the leadership style is much more goal oriented, or it's like the super simple example I know, and I'm so embarrassed like saying this in front of you because I know nothing, is like go take that hill, right? It's not like get this truck, load this truck, get these supplies, load these supplies, do this, and this, and then go take over that hill. It's like, hey, we need that hill because it's important in this broader context. Go figure it out. Is that like kind of a simple layman summary?
Yeah, it is. The military analogy, the military phrase would be a mission type order. So I would say, Mike, go take the hill.
Okay.
Go take the hill because I don't want the enemy to seize the town on the other side. And then, like if they don't try to go up the hill or if they abandon the hill, maybe I need to adopt my activity. But the real goal, the why, is to keep them out of that town, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny that that stereotype exists for a reason. I think every war is different. Probably every generation of veterans is a little bit different. But if you look at the current generation of veterans that fought these two wars that went on for 20 years, the longest wars in our nation's history, they absolutely did at points partake in big invasions with thousands of troops and go here, go there. I did that during the invasion, and that was a little bit more stereotypical. But most of those wars, when we deployed Americans into harm's way in Iraq or Afghanistan or elsewhere, you might have had a platoon led by a 24-year-old lieutenant and a 28-year-old sergeant, and they were sitting in some village for 7-8 months, and they had a 2-sentence mission statement. They're going to figure it out. So definitely understand the stereotype, and sometimes the military deserves that. But if you hire veterans from these most recent conflicts, you're probably going to get someone who at a young age had a whole lot of responsibility, working very independently. They had to lead a learning organization where they may have been dealing with an enemy in a village that was changing tactics daily, and they had to figure out how to adapt to that, how to listen to their people. So this will be a theme for me. I'm pretty passionate about trying to help this generation of veterans contribute in the private sector. I spent a lot of my personal time on that, and I've always, at Encino, we were pretty involved with an organization called the Honor Foundation that would use our facilities, and our people would mentor transitioning special operators. And my message is always that helping these veterans transition to the private sector is noble because we should help our veterans, but I don't think it's an act of true altruism, right? I think businesses can get a lot out of hiring these young leaders and young service people who've had a lot of responsibility, dealt with some pretty hard stuff, had to really demonstrate resilience. They can really help companies. And so for me, I think that stereotype, again, understood and deserved. But I think when you peel it back and really engage with the young men and women that our nation asked to go abroad for 20 plus years, you're going to see something pretty different.
Yeah, I have seen it firsthand. So once again, thank you for your service. And I know I've asked you a ton about the military just in our time together. So I'll move on from the topic. I'm sure you're sick of talking about it with me.
I'm happy to answer those questions because there's a lot of really good people who did a lot for our nation since 2001.
Yeah, for sure. The founding story of Encino, you being employee number 23 is brought up, and even on your LinkedIn profile. But it feels like you started earlier than that. You knew the founders before, and it was a bit of a spin out product. So could you touch more on the history of Encino and day zero through when you joined and what that looked like early on? Yeah,
Encino was started inside a bank just to solve a problem. They're commercial lenders that saw a really manual process. They had to track down a lot of documents, and they were just spending time doing repetitive things, and it felt like digitizing that process could help them speed things up. They had a distributed team. They literally been faxing big, thick documents around or FedExing documents, and putting things into the cloud allowed them to just run a better institution. And then the application was built on Salesforce back in 2012. We all kind of take cloud I think for granted now. Back in 2012, it was pretty remarkable to think that a financial institution would put any kind of customer data in the cloud. To the idea of, I spent a lot of times, I started off as a consultant. I spent a lot of times this first few years just sitting with community bankers, telling them you can put that tax return into the cloud. It's going to be safe. Other institutions are not going to see it. It's not going to end up in some, foreign country with bad actors stealing Social Security. So I really respect the vision that they and Pierre, our CEO, when he was brought in to spin the company out, had, just to see where cloud would take the industry and take all of us. So we took that piece of code, spun it out, started as a commercial lending product, to help people automate, digitize, and streamline commercial lending. We saw awesome effects, taking time to approval on a loan down like 40-50%, which obviously is great for the bank, is great for the customer, helps people do things more efficiently. And then over time, we pursued a more aggressive vision of just helping banks lend money to businesses. We thought that cloud would allow banks to build out a single platform where they could fulfill all the loans, all the deposit account opening and deposit activity, all the treasury management activity that they would need in one platform. And we delivered that. And I'm really proud of that. And I think when you look at the journey, it's a lot, right? It takes a lot to get a company off the ground. It's even harder to figure out how to tell the market a story about something that'll hit multiple stakeholders in institution. But Pierre led us through that, and the team rallied to it. I'm really proud that we delivered that single platform.
And that product strategy, was the company pulled in that direction? Did you have clients saying, "Oh, if you could help with consumer lending or opening bank accounts," or was that a inside executive decision? Hey, here's what we're going to do to become a huge company.
That's a super interesting question. And I think, Pierre, who I spoke about, the founding CEO, like he's one of the most inspiring optimists I've ever met, right? So everything he does is going to be this big. And so I think he always thought big. But I think we did spend a lot of time with our customers. And I think as an entrepreneur, Mike, if you spend enough time with your customers, you collaborate enough with your team, it's going to be hard to say, did the market tell us that? Do we have the big idea? Because the feedback loop should be so tight. I think there's just a real industry need, right? So pre-cloud institutions had to define their customer relationships either by how they were organized or by their software tools. It's like, hey, you're applying for this loan, you're going to go through this system because I've got this brittle, old, terrible on-prem system, or hey, you're above this revenue line, and it would result in customers getting a totally different experience across segments or across products that were being fulfilled. And so we just thought as we started the company that we could do better, and that banks could do better, customers could get a better experience by getting all that in one place. So a lot of vision and inspiration from Pierre. I think good partnership from our teams, and just a lot of listening to customers and spending time with them.
Well, on that note, I haven't spoken with Pierre directly, but I've listened to him on some earnings calls. And between the accent, the energy, and the industry knowledge, like I could see why he's very much loved as a CEO. The guy knows what's up. He's very, very impressive. So
he's a good man. He's good to me. And I learned with time, he can get away with saying things I can't because of that South African accent. I've got this watered down Texas accent. I have a lot less wit than what I can say, but Pierre can get away with it. But he's a master. As you're building a company, at least I know I can reflect on some like flagship clients we signed where it was just, okay, we're onto something, or it's the next phase of growth. As you reflect on nCino, were there certain banks where it's like, whoa, we had no business landing that client, but we got them, and that's the start of something new? Like just anything there? Yeah, I think any entrepreneur is going to have those stories. The one that I think really transformed our company the most was in 2014, December 19th. 2014, then SunTrust
Wow,
Bank.
you really remember it. Yeah.
It's a big deal, Mike. SunTrust Bank, which is now part of Truist, bet on us for our commercial lending solution that we could transform their whole commercial bank. It was a pretty cool entrepreneurial double the company moment. That one signature on December 19th, 2014, literally double the ARR that we had.
Okay, that is a big deal. Yes.
Yeah,
I remember that exact day also.
It was pretty good. Yeah, it was funny. I was flying back with one of the founders, who's one of my close colleagues, and he was really excited because he's a founder and he knew what that meant to double the company. And I was freaked out because I worked in services and had to deliver it all. But we did. We partnered up with those customers, and what's interesting is that we had a lot of work to do to take the product up market, to get it ready to handle, give SunTrust Bank what they deserved. But we had been pretty above board the whole time. Like, look, we don't do that now, but we will. Or, hey, can you partner with me on this? And it was a true partnership, right? I think that relationship never felt like I was a vendor, and they never felt like a buyer, right? Like they were really betting on us. And I remember sitting late one night in Atlanta. I spent a bunch of time up there where we were helping them understand what we could do for that bank, and talking to one of their executives and understanding, she was making a career-defining bet by betting on us. So with that comes a lot of responsibility, and we delivered for her. She did well because of it, right? Obviously, got a lot of recognition for her leadership and vision, but those kinds of transformational moments require true partnership, requires a lot of follow through. And it's not like a side project for the company, right? We'll hit those moments at Flowcast as we continue going up market, as we continue going international, as we build out this platform for the controller and for the CFO. And you just have to realize someone's betting on us, and we're going to have to deliver for them, and you treat it as such. But it sure does feel good when they get live, right? And you know that you deliver what you did, and you start measuring the business value, seeing what you did for them. So that's the goal.
And we're a B2B company. Everyone says B2B enterprise software, but the reality is we're humans selling to humans who work at a business. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they have their own goals and things going on within their life. And so one of the things I get most proud of is when we see a client who took a risk and then ultimately they get promoted because of it. That's one of the coolest moments. So I mean, if you're selling to C-level, there's only so much more they can go. But we sell to controllers, and it's awesome when you see a controller become a CAO, become a CFO. It's such a rewarding experience.
They move to a bigger company. They get industry awards. That's the good stuff for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so can we talk through some of the challenges of multi-product? So you were started on the commercial lending side. What was the second product? And then how did that change go-to-market or customer success? What was the impact of just adding a second product line?
We started commercial lending or helping all these institutions lend money to businesses. And then we went into retail or consumer. And, it's still in banking, but it's very much a different language, different competitive pressures, different regulatory requirements, different technical requirements. And I think you just have to realize as you go multi-product, it's not a tweak. In some situations, you may literally need to figure out how to immerse yourself in a different piece of an institution's culture. You may have to learn a different language. And, we made a real push on specialization, same that we'll do here at Flowcast, is that when you go to that different business problem that you're solving, because again, helping banks lend money to businesses was a pretty clearly defined solution to a specific problem. The customer journey for a consumer is very different. So for us, obviously helping streamline the close and everything that goes into that process is a very distinct skill set, is a very distinct language. But with what we're doing at compliance, and I'm just so excited to see the value that we can add to customers by including that in their deployment of the Flowcast platform. There's echoes, but it's different. And I think we're just going to have to treat it as such. And I see some of the industry leaders that we're bringing in at Flowcast, some of the compliance experts, and that's exactly what we're going to have to keep doing, because it may feel like a different product, right? It is, but it's not. It's a business solution that we're providing to help a customer fix something. And we have to understand that each of those new solutions that we launch is going to require different expertise, different engagement with our customers, different marketing messages, but most importantly, different experts to tie off with the customer and help make sure that we listen to them and that we deliver what we said we would deliver.
And here's a great example of why experience matters. Up front, and from my lens, it's like the close is so connected to compliance, in particular Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. There's even a integration point between Flowcast proper and that. Why can't we just give it to everyone to sell? When they all these employees live under the same umbrella with the office of the CFO, but they are unique pain points, and we've seen a lot of benefit from having somebody who is a complete Sarbanes-Oxley and compliance expert, able to speak the language of the internal auditors and everything. So a lot of value, and I couldn't agree more with that approach to everything. You clearly grew with nCino. We're there from the beginning. You guys went public. You had an incredible run, and we share investors as well. So Insight was one of your bigger investors. Insight's one of our bigger investors, and they're on the board. And I know that Insight does not suffer fools, in particular with promotion paths. And so I'd love to understand, your progression from CS to president and CRO through an IPO. To me, is just like mind-boggling. So could you tell me a little bit more around how you grew over the years, both within your role and as a company, and then what role does the board and the investors play in that? Because, oftentimes investors can just be like, oh, let's replace them and get my own person in here who can help scale. But clearly they did not take that approach with Encino, and it worked out really well for him. So can you just tell me a little bit more about that career progression?
Yeah, capital partners and investors really do matter. Yeah, the folks at Insight came in early. The folks at Wellington Management came in early, and the best investors are the ones that when you say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" They help you, right? And I think some investors will show up and they'll give you a good pitch. I was really blessed at Encino with investors that would follow up, sometimes helping us with customer introductions, a lot of times giving us opportunities to bounce ideas around or get access to other people. So we had a really good engagement with them. I think the best investors are ones that are going to push you to be great, right? They're not going to accept a mediocre plan. They're not going to accept mediocre results. But kind of like I said earlier, I think I just always knew when I met with our board that they had high expectations for us and they thought we could do it, and I always wanted to rise to that level for them.
Mm-hmm. That's my experience with Jeff, who was your board member. That pretty clearly summarized. I mean, Jeff's a big expectation guy, but then also is like, go figure it out. You'll figure it out. I trust you.
Huh.
Negotiating the Flowcast term sheet with him was one of my favorite things because it really was. It was almost I left that negotiation wanting to work with him because of his approach on how he got to the price. It was a fascinating thing, right? It's just, I'll play a little bit more. I think you guys are going to be huge. I believe in you. Let's go do it. And it was like, let's go do that.
Yeah, there are always people I didn't want to let down, for sure.
No, they're always. And I know I'm going to give a little pitch for Insight just real quickly on this podcast because they have the private equity side as well. So sometimes they're misconstrued as a fund. But I got to say, as a founder, they've been insanely supportive of me. Very much, let us take the direction, but they're to provide guidance and have high expectations. Like I've certainly had some tough conversations where they have very high expectations, but incredible partner, and we've had him for. Man, we've been working. We were invested in around the same time, so we've been working with them for 7 years at this point, and they're great. They're great. Let's get hyper tactical. As you approach the IPO, how did the business change? You've told me some horror stories around how my life is going to change post IPO. But can we just walk through like as you ramped up, what did that look like, and then that time kind of during the IPO and post IPO, what does that transition look like?
I think what attracted me to the team at Flowcast is that it was never a goal of ours to IPO. And I didn't stay at Encino for the duration I did because I wanted to IPO. I just wanted to build a really good company. And IPO is a way for us along that journey to building a good, enduring company to have access to public markets, which would allow us to buy great companies, which we did. It was an access to capital. If we want to invest more in our products organically, it was a way for us to reward our employees and then also get liquidity for the early shareholders who bet on us. So I just view an IPO as it is a waypoint on a journey. Now, it's not one that you just do on a whim. You have to be really thoughtful in how you prepare for it. What we always said is that we wanted to have the option to go public. And that what that meant is, and I think that was, sometimes words matter, Mike, because it didn't make a later IPO or not IPOing a failure. We wanted to have the option to go public. And our thought process was that if we have the option to go public, it means that we have all the institutional rigor and the management cadences to stand up to that scrutiny, and we're ready for it because you don't do that overnight. But again, I would be really hesitant about building a company to go public because ultimately, when you go public, you're taking people's money to help build a big company, and so we always viewed it as a waypoint. I think understanding that you're going to be on the scoreboard though for us, like for me as a revenue leader, understanding that you do hit a point where it matters if a deal signs on the last day of the fiscal year, the first day of the fiscal year, and just helping the team understand that if you're custodians of a market and you're entrusted with the revenue, you have to do everything that you can to deliver so you maintain credibility with your stakeholders so you can potentially reinvest via access to public markets, so you can potentially buy companies, so you can reward your employees with long-term equity mechanisms, and also so your early investors can eventually give liquidities and give that money back to their LPs. So I think just preparing to get up on that stage is work. And I think the challenge for leaders is making sure that you do that work, which is demanding and it's expensive and it's energy for a lot of your most important people. We have to do this work so we can get ready, but I can't take my eye off the ball because going public it's like it's getting drafted into the NFL. I don't know a lot of Hall of Famers whose goal it was to be drafted, Mike, right? They wanted to be really good football players. And it's a waypoint in a journey, but again, you have to be really thoughtful about it, having been through that process and understanding all the, particularly in the office of the CFO, the work that our team had to do. Flowcast obviously stood out for me. I knew the company by reputation because we'd used it and I'd seen the work that goes in, and I think we can add a lot of value there for folks who want to use an IPO potentially as a waypoint onto building a big and enduring company.
Well, getting you over to Flowcast, it certainly didn't hurt that your company were raving fans of ours, and we helped y'all go public, and everything worked out. So that was a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. We talk about pre-IPO prep a lot around Flowcast, and we have a ton of content around the accounting side of it. You got to put controls in place. You need to build the right team, hire the right people. But a lot of accountants, we don't have much purview into how that supports the chief revenue officer or the president or others. So from your lens, where could accounting help you be successful as the president and the revenue leader?
So we would spend a lot of time, either me or my deal desk or the team, with our partners in finance to try to make sure we understood the impact of how we structure commercial agreements on our P&L, right? Because ultimately, there's an impact there. You do, as a public company, give guidance on what you're going to do in a year, and sometimes that's daunting, particularly when the macro doesn't totally cooperate. But understanding that you're making a commitment on what your revenues are going to be, on your profitability, your margin profile, and so I think the word partnership would be what I would say. Some of the most fun I had and most rewarding partnerships that I had in being a revenue leader is, we're with the team in the finance function, because that's really where the customer intersects how we deliver for our shareholders, for our stakeholders. So obviously, I've sat plenty of times post a quarter, anxious to see like what the numbers would be. It's like you're watching a slot machine, you're wondering what numbers you're going to land on. So obviously, speed to close is something that's pretty compelling for an executive team, particularly if you're preparing for or running a company in the public markets. I think just helping that team move quickly and again understand you may be late in a fiscal period and need to understand how a deal structure could potentially impact things. Speed really matters. But I would use the word partnership, right? Because ultimately, it's a running dialogue and it's someone you have to have a high level of trust with and a lot of communication with. And fortunately, I had a fantastic team and had a lot of fun with them.
Awesome. Well, that's wonderful to hear that accounting was helpful for you. And there's also the compliance angle and the risk side of it. So as a president, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, a Section 13 officer. Is that the
16
for the SEC?
16.
Section 16. So that means you have an additional layer of responsibility, right? You're attesting to fraud? Like, can you tell us more about the distinction between being a Section 16 versus not?
Yeah, you're taking on a lot of personal and reputational responsibility because you'll see a financial statement go out at the end of a quarter or a year and it's hundreds of pages. You sign something saying all that's correct, right? So ultimately, making sure that you're on a good, clean shop really matters. For me, it is you get pause when you sign, electronically sign that document each fiscal period. But I never really worried about it. I think, we always, we talked a lot about reputation, innovation, and speed. And part of reputation is just doing the right thing. That was also a core value of the company. So as long as you're running a good, clean business and you make good decisions that you would be proud to explain, and you hire and promote leaders who do the same, I never worried about it. But, I think the rigor that we put into the operational control side and the compliance side obviously was really important to me because you're on a different stage, and ultimately you're running the company with some pension funds money, right? That some public school teacher has invested their savings in, and you have to make sure you take care of them. And one blip or one mistake along the way could have a pretty big impact on the shareholders who trusted you. So it's, there's a little bit of gulp a few times you do it, but I always just try to think about the awesome team that I had and the supporting crew that we had, and I trusted them a lot.
Yeah, you're really trusting everyone doing the work to put the financials together. And yeah, so that's a really important thing, I think, for accounting to realize is all the work that we do ultimately supports our executives signing off on something that's incredibly risky. And I'm not speaking for you, Josh, of course, but a lot of executives are not ones to read an entire financial statement and go through every line item and really be like, yes, I attest to all this. So there's a whole lot of trust that goes into what everyone's signing off on. So,
and I saw
accounting.
I saw the lights were on pretty late in the office during accounting season, during audit season, right? Because ultimately, that's a little bit of their Super Bowl. And so I'm really proud of how they did, and obviously had a pretty good view into everything that goes into delivering a good, clean audit and closing out the books repeatedly. And again, it's something I'm excited to help Flowcast customers do the same.
Awesome. I'm going to wrap on getting close to the end here, I think, but one of the interesting topics I like is how you kind of dealt with maybe business challenges over the year or some adversity. So if you think back at your time in Encino, what was your biggest "oh crap" moment, and how did you and the team approach that?
I think, and probably a lot of our generational leaders would say this, but when COVID locked everything down, obviously we had lots of great plans and we had lots of things going on. The first few weeks were frightening for a lot of us because, particularly software companies that were still in the investment phase. That's a euphemism for still burning cash. It was pretty daunting, and we were there. So for us, we kind of put everything on pause. So we redoubled in the U.S. Our efforts to support the PPP program, which was helping businesses get liquidity. And I think that was a pretty good exercise for us and just controlling what we could control, right? Obviously, at that point, financial institutions weren't ready to sign up for big transformation programs. They had other problems to solve. And we did a fairly aggressive medium-term pivot to support that. But I think that's where you kind of see what team you built is when things get tough. I think a lot of software companies have seen that over the last few years as buyers get a lot more discerning and budgets have tightened. So that was a tough moment, but I'm really proud of how we performed and how we delivered for our customers. I've never seen product and professional services people work like that. It was nonstop, but they delivered. And I think on the other side of it, you can peel back the revenue side, but reputationally and trust-wise, it really accelerated us with a lot of accounts because when it was tough, we showed up for them and we worked crazy hours. We did things we said we would do, and that was pretty rewarding.
That's awesome. Hey, similar here. Yeah, COVID felt like one of those moments where I think the first time I felt like it was an existential threat to our business and like, oh, everything we've worked for so hard for, at that point, 6 years is like, this just might be gone. And that's a moment where, man, you figure out if you have the right people, can you pull together and get through it and make it happen? Or are you going to start, falling apart as an organization? So that's awesome. Awesome to hear. Clearly worked out well for you guys. And yeah, I feel like there have been many once in a lifetime events now at this point and over the last 4 years in building out companies to where it's hardened a lot of businesses and a lot of leadership teams.
Yeah. This is funny. You say this can be a normal year, but I'm trying to remember what normal was like. It's been a few. So
it's do you want COVID? You want a banking collapse? I think a lot of people forget the SVB thing. Like that was like that was a massive deal when it happened. There's a whole war in Ukraine going on, right? There's all these once in a lifetime events. So it's been fun navigating through it though. Well, Josh, I know you're busy ramping up, getting to know everyone and figuring out what's going on at Flowcast. But I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me a little bit more and put together some great content for our audience. I hope they enjoyed it. Your story and background to me is very inspirational, and I couldn't be happier to have you on board.
I'm glad to be here. I appreciate it. Thanks for trusting me.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Have a good one.
Thank you.